They shoved me into the kennel, giggling like schoolchildren who thought cruelty was clever. "She's just another stray, my daughter." In-law sneered, jangling the keys before snapping the lock shut. I didn't plead. I lowered myself onto the damp mat, back against the steel bars, letting the odor of rust, fur, and stale urine fold over me like a heavy coat. At 76, I'd endured harsher winters than a single night behind a gate, but never such a deliberate humiliation. That morning I had come to the animal refuge without warning. My refuge. My late husband and I built it from sweat, hope, and scraped together savings. I once scrubbed every floor, bottle, fed the sick, remembered which dog liked chicken and which liked beef. They weren't strays. To me, they were guests. Survivors. I hadn't stepped inside for months. After Harold's death, I had turned daily duties over to my son Brian and his wife Lacey, only for a while. He'd said, "You've earned rest, Mom. Let us take it from here." I believed him. I shouldn't have. At first they called with updates, then silence. When I asked to visit, there was always a reason: a remodel, a staff meeting, flea treatment day. But something in me cracked this morning, and I walked straight through the door. The teen at the desk mumbled, "They're not here," but I heard Brian's bark like laugh echoing from the back. Past the faded Merles, now beige, no blankets in kennels, 2 dogs trembling in the cold. I found them. "Mom," he barked, as if I'd trespassed. "What's happening here?" I asked. "You can't just walk in," he said. "You raised me to be responsible. Trust us." Lacey folded her arms. "Blankets get torn up. It's safer this way. We're running this place fine without your interference." The word interference burned. "I'm not leaving," I said. They didn't argue. They smiled like I was some silly old woman. "Then follow safety protocol," Lacey said, leading me to an isolation kennel at the far end. I stepped inside. Still hoping it was a joke, she closed the gate. The lock clicked. Their laughter trailed off. Lights went dark. Barking faded. I sat curled on the concrete while cold crept into my skirt. Somewhere a dog whimpered. "I'm here," I whispered back. Sleep never came, only drifting thoughts of Harold, the quiet man who always told me, "Martha, never let anyone tell you your worth. You decide that." A key rattled. Rosa, the young janitor, peeked in. "Mrs. H, what are you doing in there?" "They locked me in," I said calmly. "Would you let me out?" She did, eyes wide. "Should I call someone?" "No," I said, brushing fur off my skirt. "But I need a phone." By 9 I'd spoken to my lawyer. By 10 my financial advisor. By 11 I had the keys to Harold's old office. At noon a board meeting would take place, and Brian and Lacey didn't yet know what was about to happen. After the longest shower of my life, scrubbing until my skin flushed, I still couldn't wash away the betrayal. My own son, the boy I once carried through the rain, had locked me in a cage. I hadn't cried since Harold's funeral, and I didn't now. Instead, a cold clarity settled in. I opened the drawer of old files and found the deed, the nonprofit papers, the durable power of attorney. My name still held legal authority. They had assumed the old woman had surrendered. They hadn't even checked. I called Mr. Benton, our attorney. "Tell me everything," he said. I did. "When I finished," he said quietly, "I'll be at your house in an hour." Together we traced every account, every filing. Brian had opened a new operating account, but the original one and an untouched savings account Harold and I had kept, no 138,000, still sat under my control. Enough to move quickly. Enough to reclaim what mattered. By sunset, Mr. Benton had filed motions, frozen unauthorized funds, and drafted cease and desist letters. I stood in Harold's old office, breathing air that smelled of dust and old carpet, uncovering his desk. The faint ring from his coffee mug still marked the corner. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it because they had turned a refuge into a transaction. Because when they locked me behind bars, they thought I'd stay there waiting for a pat on the head. They forgot who built this place. Tomorrow, I would take it back. That evening, the house felt painfully quiet. Harold's chair sat in its corner, cushion still dented with his shape. I touched the bruise circling my arm, not for pain but to remember. I told no one else what had happened. Some truths you hold close until the time to speak arrives. Some truths don't wait for words. They demand action. I slid open the hall table drawer where my checkbooks lived. Years ago, that drawer held permission slips, snack money, Harold's crooked grocery lists. Now it was only paper and air. At the very back sat a thick envelope marked with Brian's name. Inside lay the canceled checks I'd written to him over the years. $15,000 toward their first house, a few hundred here for Lacey's dental work, $3,400 for unexpected moving fees. Smaller sums, steady as breadcrumbs, all leading to a truth I hadn't wanted to see while I was giving. They were making me feel like a burden. It wasn't only money. It was their tone, managerial, dismissive, as if I were a chore they kept postponing. Last Thanksgiving I arrived with pies. Brian barely looked up and told me to leave them on the counter. Lacey didn't say thank you. At Christmas they handed me a perfumed candle I'm allergic to. When I mentioned it gently, she said, then rejiffed it. And still I kept showing up, making excuses. Maybe they're busy, maybe they don't know how they sound. Maybe they still love me. That night at the kitchen table, I stopped pretending. By 5 a.m., I had paper spread out before me, coffee brewed black the way Harold liked it. At 5:30 I buttoned my navy cardigan. At 600 I packed a folder, spare keys, 2 pens. At 6:45 I locked my front door and drove to the shelter. Darkness still lay over the parking lot, but the porch lights burned. Rosa's car was already there. She stood by the side entrance with a folder clutched to her chest. "You're early," I said. "Couldn't sleep," she murmured. We didn't hug. We nodded and went inside. The air smelled of damp concrete and old bleach, familiar but wrong. "They're not in yet," I asked. "No," she said. "They usually arrive around 8. "Good." As we passed the kennels, dogs stirred, some wagging weak tails, some peering out with dull eyes. An old shepherd mix gave a single bark. I crouched and whispered, "We're going to fix this." In Harold's old office, now a storage closet, we cleared boxes, wiped dust, and laid out our papers. Rosa opened her laptop, connecting to the untouched security cameras. The footage showed it all: me stepping into the kennel, Brian shutting the door, Lacey locking it, both laughing. Rosa's voice was low. "That's enough evidence." "I'm not here to punish them," I said, staring at Lacey's paused face on the screen. "I'm here to protect what we built." At 8:07 the front door opened. Voices floated down the hall. "Dog food shipments late again. Threatened to cancel," Brian said. I stepped into the corridor as they turned the corner. Brian's smile froze. "Mum, what are you doing here?" Lacey demanded. "I'm here because I never left," I said. "You just forgot whose name is still on the deed." Their faces flickered. "What are you talking about?" Brian asked, voice tightening. "You'll find out in 5 minutes. Board review starts this morning. Mr. Benton will be joining us. Until then, don't touch a thing, don't log into any system." "Clear." "You can't," Lacey began. "I can," I said, "and I have. This shelter is under emergency review for mismanagement, fraud." And Brian stepped forward. "I spent the night in a dog cage. You put me there. You shut off the lights. You laughed. I'm not insane. I'm awake." Rosa emerged from the office holding the laptop. "We have footage." Lacey flushed. Brian froze. "I'd advise you to hire a lawyer," I said, turning away as the board began arriving. By 8:15 the room filled with folding chairs, a borrowed coffee pot, and manila folders labeled in Rosa's neat hand. Retirees. Longtime volunteers, a couple of younger faces. People who remembered what the shelter once was. Brian had kept them at a distance with emails. But they came when I called. Mr. Benton began with the footage. No sound was needed. Images alone carried weight. The kennel, the lock, their laughter. A hush moved through the room. He laid out the document's original deed, bylaws, power of attorney. No legal transfer. No vote, not even an email. I spoke quietly. "For months I've been told to stay out, that it's not my place. I'm not here to run everything again. I'm here because this place was built with our hands for animals who can't speak. No one, not even family, has the right to erase someone still breathing." Rosa distributed expense sheets, purchase orders, vendor contracts. Mr. Benton highlighted discrepancies. Inflated costs, missing invoices, unexplained consulting fees. Nothing outright criminal, but all of it wrong. The vote wasn't close. 12 in favor of emergency removal, 1 abstention. I was reinstated as acting director immediately. Brian stood. "This is ridiculous. She hasn't been involved for years." "I haven't been allowed to," I said. "This place needs modern systems. This place needs blankets, Rosa cut in, and working light bulbs and food that's not expired. Lacey snapped. You're doing this to punish us. If I wanted to punish you, I said calmly, I'd let the IRS handle you. Mr. Benton handed them sealed envelopes. Your access is revoked. Any return without approval will be trespassing. They left small and silent. We made lists. Rosa found a whiteboard under a tarp. Volunteers offered to call donors, catalog supplies. Around noon I walked the kennels again. Dogs seemed more alert. One crooked-eared mutt pressed his nose to the bars. I knelt. Hello, sweetheart, I whispered. He licked my hand once. That evening at home I made soup, lit an unscented candle, poured a single glass of wine from Harold's birthday bottle. The phone rang twice from unknown numbers. I didn't answer. Let them wonder. Let them sit with silence for once. I stepped onto the porch and listened to the insects. Tomorrow would be busy. Tonight I was just a woman in her chair, finally breathing. They called me no better than a stray. They thought it was an insult. But when I looked at those worn kennels, the chipped bowls, the waiting eyes of the animals, I realized they were right. I was a stray too. Unwanted, underestimated, but still alive. Strays endure. Strays return. And sometimes, strays defend what's theirs. That morning, while they were still wrapped in comfort and sleep, I drove home with hands stiff from cold but a spirit steady with resolve, not despair. Never again. Something stronger had settled in me, purpose. By 7:00 a.m., I was dressed, hair pulled tight, shoes polished, coat hanging ready on the chair. I sat at the kitchen table with coffee warming my palms. Buttering toast I wouldn't eat, staring at a street still empty. This was Harold's table, where he once tallied shelter expenses with a pencil and patience. Today it became my command desk. I dialed Benton's number. He answered in 2 rings. Martha, how bad? Worse than I thought, I said. But not bad enough to ruin me. I never believed it would. He replied, already alert, as though he'd been waiting for this call. I need you at the shelter. 9 sharp. Bring everything. I'll be there. The routine was muscle memory, papers organized, keys polished, bag packed. I moved through the house with the same steady rhythm Harold and I once used preparing for inspections. Deliberate, precise. By 8:57, Benton was at the office door. Leather briefcase in hand, documents ready. You never lost control, he said, spreading out the charter, bylaws, and the power of attorney Harold and I had signed. Today, we prove it. At 900, we walked into the shelter. Rosa stood guard at the side entrance, nodding once. Brian's truck and Lacey's car sat outside. Good. Inside, their slogans lined the walls, hollow words dressed as mission. Brian froze when I stepped in. Lacey adjusted her coat, frowning. Benton handed them the papers. Calm, final. You're suspended. Effective immediately? You can't. Brian started. I can? I said evenly. I never surrendered this place. You locked me in a kennel like an unwanted dog. You mocked me as a stray. But you were wrong. I wasn't abandoned. I was waiting. Rosa handed me the old binder, Harold's notes, intake logs, scribbles in the margins. I placed my hand on it like a pledge. This place is mine again. Effective now. Lacey rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being honest. This shelter was built on compassion, not greed. On love, not ledgers. By the end of the day, their access was revoked. They left wordless. Smaller than they arrived. I didn't ask for apologies. The dogs were all the witness I needed. Their eyes followed me as I walked the rows, and one little terrier barked once as if to say welcome back. That night, I reopened accounts, secured funds Harold had saved for decades, and told Rosa the words she'd been waiting for. We have seed money. We rebuild. And so we began again. Not just for the animals, but for every stray soul, human or otherwise, who needed a place where dignity still mattered. I wasn't broken. I wasn't finished. I was exactly what they feared most. A stray who had found her way home. You never stayed past 6. You sat behind the desk, signing papers for food you never ordered and supplies you never touched. His mouth opened, but I kept going. You cut volunteers. You reduced meal times. You ripped out heaters and told people it was for renovations. You forged my name and locked me in a cage. The room went silent. Fraud charges are already filed, I said. But that's not why we're here. I wanted you to hear this in front of everyone. I turned to the faces gathered. Board members, volunteers, staff I hadn't seen in years. Familiar eyes, familiar hands. This place was never about money. It was about rescue, about giving dignity to animals, and to the people who brought them here with guilt, hope, or fear. We welcomed strays of every kind and gave them reason to stand tall again. I looked at Brian and Lacey. You're no longer part of this. Benton handed them 2 envelopes. These are removal and trespass notices. You are banned from representing this shelter moving forward. Lacey scoffed, grabbing her coat. Fine. You think this place is worth saving? It'll drain you dry. I built it once, I said. I can build it again. Brian said nothing, just hunched his shoulders and left. When the door shut, the room exhaled, not applause, not cheers, but relief. Rosa brought coffee in mismatched mugs. Janelle slid the reinstatement form across the table. You're officially back, Mrs. Hale. Charlotte, our social media volunteer, lifted her phone. Do we post now? Not yet, I said. Give it a day. And after everyone left, I walked the halls alone. Every corner carried memories. The squeaky storage door, the medical room where I once waited for hours with a dog in my lap, the bulletin board covered in thank you notes. I stood in the kennel room. Dogs stirred. One young mutt with patchy fur barked once, tilting his head. I'm back, I told him. And I'm not leaving again. Behind me, someone switched on the lights. Warmth filled the space. Home, again. The first thing I did was tear down the laminated sheet that said, Time is resources. Don't waste either. Brian and Lacey had turned everything into numbers. But here, time was the gift. You sit with a trembling dog for 20 minutes because they've never known a gentle hand. You clean the floor twice because an old beagle needs the warmth. You stay because sometimes silence is all you can give. By noon, the shelter already felt alive. Rosa opened windows. Charlotte brought muffins. Janelle returned with city papers and extra coffee. Volunteers drifted back. Joan, who stitched dog beds by hand. Mira, who fostered 2 seniors and never gave them back. Even Gus, the retired plumber, came to fix the back sink. I didn't give speeches. I just handed out gloves, towels, checklists, and said, thank you for coming back. They knew what to do. Charlotte updated our page with a single post, we're open. Come home. She added a photo of Midge, the scrappy terrier, paws on the gate, head tilted like she was posing. Hundreds of comments followed. Missed you. Glad you're back. Where do I sign up? That afternoon, I sat at Harold's old desk, sorting files. Some invoices were paid twice, others ignored. Vet appointments canceled. A file marked behavioral risk, put down, was next to the name of a sweet but timid dog. I crossed it out and wrote, review with staff. If Lacey had stayed, that dog would have disappeared quietly. Not anymore. We reinstated full medical checks, reconnected with the city vet, and called every old volunteer. Rosa took over training, calm, kind, patient. Watching her reminded me of myself 20 years ago. She didn't rush, she saw them. I stayed late again. Repairs still waited, cracked tiles, sagging fences. But the place breathed. Passing the cage they once locked me in, I paused. Rosa wanted it gone. But I told her to wait. Pain teaches you, but it doesn't need a monument. Maybe one day it would be a quiet room for new arrivals. But never again a prison. That night, I locked up and stood in the soft evening air. The shelter wasn't healed, but it was alive again. The next morning, the old brass bell above the front door chimed. Harold had hung it in 91, saying a shelter should never feel like a warehouse. A woman stood in the doorway with her daughter, no older than 7, clutching a worn pink backpack. We saw the sign online, she said nervously. Come in, I said. You're the first today. The girl wandered to the photo board, eyes wide. She froze at Midge's kennel. Midge barked once, then sat. Tail tapping, the girl tapped back. When they returned, she carried a folder with her name on it. Emma. I like Midge, she said softly. Midge likes you too, I replied. They didn't take her home that day. Still paperwork and checks to do, but promised to return Saturday. As they left, the girl turned back. She remembered me. She will tomorrow too, I said. That night, as I closed up, Midge wagged when she saw me. She picked you, I whispered. But I knew what I didn't say aloud. She reminded me of myself. Overlooked, waiting. And when someone finally saw her, she lit up like a match in the dark. The shelter was alive, and so was I, Gus, grumbling as always but steady. dug through the storage closet until he unearthed an old shoebox filled with handwritten ledgers from before everything went digital. It felt like every soul who had ever cared for this place was stepping back in, not for payback, but for protection. The next morning, I stood at the city clerk's office before the doors unlocked. I asked for every document tied to our shelter from the past 5 years. Zoning records, nonprofit filings, tax reports. Some pages were clean, others weren't. Brian had submitted false expense reports, draining funds into so-called consulting. One vendor looked like a shell company, tied only to a P.O. box I didn't recognize. Lacey's name was plastered across credit card statements. Charges for clothes, a resort weekend disguised as a conference. All of it under my name. That night, I stacked the files on the dining room table beside Harold's photo. For a long while, I just stared. Then I wrote my own letter. Not bitter, not dramatic, careful. Dates, numbers, evidence. By midnight, it was sealed and addressed. The audit wasn't punishment. It was opportunity. A chance to separate their mess from my name. To rebuild not only in kennels and wagging tails, but in structure, in law and trust. By week's end, our full response was ready. Benton filed it directly. 2 days later, confirmation came. The audit paused, investigation pending. No penalties, no closure notice, just silence. This time, the good kind. That evening, I returned to the shelter. Sunset poured gold through the kennels. Midge slept peacefully, chest rising and falling. I leaned against the wall and whispered, "We're not going anywhere." And I meant it. No one planned a party. No time, no budget, no agreement. Rosa said to wait. Gus muttered about tempting fate. Charlotte ignored us and posted anyway, homecoming day this Saturday. No speeches. Just coffee, dogs, and the people who make this place what it is. Word spread fast. On Saturday morning, the shelter felt nothing like it had a year ago. Gone were the clipped rules, the locked closets, the thin blankets. In their place hung sun, faded banners from old adoption drives. Mismatched chairs lined the yard, donated by neighbors, borrowed from churches. Someone brought donuts. Someone else lemonade. By 9 a.m., the lot overflowed. Families came with photos of the dogs they'd adopted. Children darted between kennels. An older man, grease on his hands, circled the runs 3 times before sitting cross-legged beside a shy brindle mutt. No words. Just a hand held out, and the dog crept closer. That was enough inside. Rosa commanded like a general, treats, towels, direction. Charlotte laughed between photos. Music drifted from someone's speaker. Oldies. Motown. For a heartbeat, it felt like Harold might walk through the door again with his clipboard, grinning. At noon, a local diner dropped off soup and sandwiches. No bill. Just a note, "Welcome back, Mrs. Hale." No speeches followed. None were needed. Presence was the speech. By afternoon, Charlotte reported 30 adoption inquiries, 13 follow-ups, even a message from the mayor's office. "They love a comeback story." She grinned. I smiled. Not for the mayor, but because she was right. We hadn't rebuilt with money. We rebuilt with memory, stubbornness, and love poured into every corner. As dusk fell, people lingered, hugging, waving. A woman pressed a crumpled 20 into my hand. "It's not much," she said. "But thank you." After everyone left, I walked the grounds one last time. Dogs fed, trash bins full, chairs stacked neatly. Quiet complete. The audit closed quietly on a Thursday. A thick envelope. 3 clipped pages. Findings, exoneration, and a typed note. "Thank you for your clarity and cooperation. Your stewardship shows a rare commitment across decades. Please consider this matter closed." I smoothed the page with my palm. Not shock, not relief. Stillness. The kind that comes after a long, held breath finally lets go. That night, I poured a single glass of Harold's scotch, brushed the dust from the bottle, and lifted it toward his photo. "We did it," I whispered quiet. "Steady." The next day, I placed the letter in the shelter's binder. Rosa read it, laid her hand on mine. No one else would have held on. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Soon after, donations trickled in. Small bills, envelopes with notes. For Midge, for whoever's next, for you. Rosa turned the storage room into a proper intake suite. Gus fixed the back fence. Charlotte arranged a school visit. Life was returning. Not just survival, but rhythm. One evening, Emma returned, the little girl with the pink backpack. This time, Midge trotted beside her on a leash, tail high. "We wanted to say thank you," her mother said. Emma held out a drawing. Midge beside a red, roofed house, flowers blooming. At the bottom, in careful letters, Miss Martha's dogs find homes. My throat tightened. You remembered, I whispered. Emma nodded. You helped her remember how to be good. Later that week, I handed Rosa the original brass keys. No speeches, just a quiet moment in the intake room. It's time, I said. She accepted them with wide eyes. You're not leaving, though, she asked. No, I'll still be here, just not behind that desk. That afternoon, I walked the shelter one last time as its director. The kennels were calm. Children drew pictures of their favorite dogs. Out back, Charlotte's garden was already sprouting. Tomatoes, basil, peppers. Signs of life everywhere, not just survival, living. And I knew it didn't need me to hold every piece anymore. I had brought it back to breath. Now someone else could help it sing. That night, at home, I boxed Harold's files, tied them neatly, and set them aside. I opened Emma's drawing again. Miss Martha's dogs find homes. Not anymore, they found theirs. Now, it's someone else's turn to keep the doors open. And maybe it's yours. If you've been wondering if it's worth standing back up, worth fighting for what they said was lost, take this as your sign. Go back. Fix what they said was beyond repair. Because they were wrong. And you're not finished yet.